My name is Nandu Madhava, and I'm here to talk to you about a founder's journey to exit. Again, I'll try to repeat that, a founder's journey to exit. Now, first of all, some basic questions. A few of you might not be familiar with Twitch. Our core demographic tends to be 15 to 25-year-olds, so it tends to be a very youth-driven brand and youth-driven experience. But what is Twitch? Twitch is a global community that comes together each day to create multiplayer entertainment. Live, unique, unpredictable experiences created and shared interactions by millions. So I'll try to put a little bit more color behind that. I'll give you a concept of our size. So every month, we have 3 million unique broadcasting partners that are creating content on Twitch. And those 3 million unique broadcasters drive, on average, about 15 million daily visitors. Now, it means at any given time, we probably have about 1 million people on the platform turning in to watch live content. And that content could be anything around gaming, IRL content, lifestyle content, cooking content, you name it. But how did it start? So let's go back a bit. In 2007, one of the original founders of Twitch, Justin Kahn, started Justin.tv, literally by putting on a cam and started walking around and capturing himself out there. And an interesting thing is the platform opened it up for other creators to create their own content and to broadcast themselves and to tell their story about what they were doing. As we started to grow, we found that there were certain verticals that just took off, that people just love to experience. Most notably, gaming, esports, and other interactive gaming content. Now, if we take some of the big moments that have happened for us in the last year, we had Ninja playing with Drake, where millions of people turned in and literally watched, hey, these two playing Fortnite together. It was one of those moments where Ninja all of a sudden became a household name for a lot of people because people already knew who Drake was, but it was this concept of, yes, everybody plays a game, and it's a whole lot more fun when you're playing together and you're sharing that experience. So that's Twitch, but right now, probably some of you are going, wait a second, Twitch is great, but who are you? Like, who am I? Who is this guy on stage? Because you saw the agenda and you saw, hey, wait, Kevin Lynn. I wanted to hear Kevin Lynn's story about the journey from being founder to exit. So it's an important time to underscore this. I am not Kevin Lynn. All right. So some of you are probably thinking, like, oh, wait, he's not Kevin Lynn? No, that's me. That's Kev. Two different people. I'm a little taller. If you ever see us together, you'll have a concept. I am not exactly Kevin Lynn. So great. But who are you and why am I here? Most unfortunately, Kev had a family emergency at the start of this week, and he's at home right now with his friends and his family. Our thoughts and our prayers are with him. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, Nandu, I'm going to ask a favor. Can you stand in for this? Because you're a founder, right? And I was like, yeah, I am. I founded my own company. But Kev, I didn't sell my company for $1 billion, right? Like I had an exit. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't a unicorn exit. And it was interesting because then connected me with the AWS team, and I found out, oh, the audience, they're entrepreneurs. They're people that are building businesses, small and medium enterprises. And I was like, wait a second, this is great, actually, because I think I actually have a very relevant story for you all because I was a founder. And the reality is this. You know, when we think about the story to an exit, and if we think about a lot of the press that we hear about, hey, it's a unicorn, and we all want to be, here's a little bit of the mathematical reality. It means approximately 1% of all funded companies ever get to that size or that status. So what does that mean for the 99% of you that are sitting there in that audience? What does that mean for you all if you think that there's only a 1% chance that I might ever become a unicorn company? Well, my story is part of that 99%. We didn't reach a unicorn status, but I think the journey of where I went and what happened with my company and then my chapters that came after should hopefully be very relevant for you all. So let me take you with a little bit of walk and kind of show you, well, who am I? What's my story? Right now, I am the general manager of Twitch, but before that, most immediately, I was a director for Twitter in India. But for the longest part of my career, I built and ran my own business. I did that for 8 years. The company was called MDill. And the way that happened, I'll go back a little bit here, is I started my professional career at Goldman Sachs. And here's the thing at Goldman. I realized at Goldman, we bought and we sold shares in companies. We kind of transacted in them. I didn't find that as interesting as building a company for the long term. So for example, like my job in San Francisco put me in interaction with a lot of CEOs and founders as a junior analyst on their team. And to me, it was always fascinating to meet a founder who had an idea, who raised capital, who executed against that capital to build a company, and to walk into a company and see hundreds of people working there, realizing that was the fruit and the product of hard work. And that, I thought, to me was more fascinating than just, again, buying and selling shares in companies. So after business school, I transitioned. I decided to become an entrepreneur. And that right there is literally my very first office. My very first office was not a WeWork because WeWork didn't exist at the time. It was 2009. And I'll describe it. My first company, we created and distributed healthcare information. Our first partners were Airtel, Docomo, Vodafone. We sold content on a subscription basis through mobile carrier gateways. But that was kind of like where we got to after 2 years. So the first 2 years of my life was literally living at my parents' home, not just broke, but in debt, and my wife was pregnant. So again, for 2 years of my life, after graduating from business school, I am living at home, my wife's pregnant, I got no money. And that is tough. And I share that story because I have a sense that if you're an entrepreneur and if you are a small or medium business and you're sitting in this audience, it's probably a story that's not too different for a lot of you. Most of you have other opportunities in your life. You could easily go back to maybe your previous job, or maybe you can go follow the traditional path of working for an employer. But you're probably saying, no, I wanted to build a business, or I joined a startup because it's small and I have a vision I want to share in that vision of where they're going. So those first few years were tough. I mean, literally at those same 2 years, I watched, hey, cool, my friends at McKinsey are getting around to fly around in business class, and I'm living at home with my parents working on this product. But it wasn't just blind faith that drove me forward. You see, I did market research. I'd built a minimum viable product. I knew that there was a willingness to pay. I saw interest in people buying that product. And I knew that we had a shot to do something. And so, over time, we did. The next 8 years, I winded up growing the business. Our first services moved beyond just SMS and mobile carrier content to start doing web content. We then grew into video content. I raised 2 rounds of venture capital. Because we were a social enterprise, I got a lot of good press. I got invited to cool conferences and had cool photo moments with guys like this. I'm not sure if anybody know who this is? Good? All right, good, excellent. Some people say, all right. So it was great. Things felt like generally on the upswing. But I'm going to get to some hard facts here. Were we growing? Yes, we were adding users. We were generating tremendous amounts of data. Were we growing revenue? Well, sorta. We were growing by 10 to 15% a year. That's not bad in some cases. Did we have earnings? EBIT? Not really. No, we were losing money. But that's not an uncommon story for a lot of startups. In fact, most startups wind up losing money for anywhere between their first 3 to 7 to who knows, maybe even 10 years. If you look at Uber, it's still losing money, right? But that's not okay in every business. And this will come to one of my key takeaways that I want everybody to hopefully have, which is be candid with the capitalization table and what raising money means to you, your team, your investors. Let me explain a little bit further here. If you're going to go out and raise venture capital, which I think a lot of you in this audience, if you're a small and medium enterprise, especially that's tech focused and scaling, probably somewhere in your plans is the concept of hey, we need to go talk to Sequoia. We need to go raise venture capital. Well, understand that if you go raise, $5 million, there is clearly an expectation that you will return a multiple of that amount back to those investors. That's the case with venture capitalists. Now, if you go take a bank loan, hey, maybe you just return the principal and some amount of interest. But you have to be very, very clear about what taking capital means to your business. And that's a problem that I come across when I think about, again, the founder's journey to an exit. A lot of founders probably aren't very realistic about what raising venture capital means. I work very closely with the ecosystem of startups still, and I think there's often this idealization like, hey, if we raise venture capital, everything's cool. Well, it certainly helps, and it's always a milestone of a company's development, but that raising capital in and of itself is not a goal. And you have to be very clear about the dilution that you take as a founder and as your team takes whenever you raise capital. Again, I'll come back to this slide because I think it's super critical. If you take capital and you decide to enter and move down that funnel, there is an expectation that you will be growing radically. Now, in my case, growing revenue at 10 to 15% a year would have been totally fine if I had never taken external capital. But once I had taken capital, there was an expectation that I should be growing at 200, 300% per year to really make this a venture-backed unicorn type business. And so then, as I was sitting there at post-our Series B and I was realizing, here are my choices. If I take more capital, I will clearly get diluted. As a founder, I will lose more and more equity in my business. My employees and their employee stock option plan will see that diluted, and our investors will own more and more of the business, which is okay if the overall valuation of the business is growing radically. But if it's not, it means you start turning into weird dynamics of becoming just an employee working for a set of investors. And at that point, when I did the cold hard math of saying, I'm probably not going to get to a unicorn exit. This was, again, after 8 years, and I had put a lot of my energy and love into the company, but this realization that we were not going to become a $1 billion exit. We weren't even going to become a $100 million exit. We weren't even possibly going to get to a $10 million exit. Wow, wait a second. So if I continue to do this role, I just get more and more diluted. It was a tough moment, and frankly, I was burned out. I was really burned out. Again, I talk about this candidly because if you're an entrepreneur in the audience, and if you're part of that experience, and if you're building a company, you probably know what this feels like. You have these ups and downs, and you realize at that point, for me, it was time to exit. Our investors, we found a decent sale for the business. Some of our investors were happy, some weren't, and frankly, I was just super burned out, and I was ready to take a break. And I remember when I went back to see one of my professors at business school, he was like, well, at least you got to an exit. He's like, what do you think you're going to do next? And I was like, I don't know what I'm qualified to do. I've been CEO of a business. What does that qualify me for? I really don't know. Maybe I just have to go run and do another business. And I wasn't exactly sure when this happened. Pretty interesting thing. My friend Valerie Wagner and her partner Amya had just sold their business to Twitter. Valerie had been building her company in parallel around the same time I had been building mine. And after she sold her company to Twitter, the senior executive team at Twitter said, hey, Valerie, why don't you move back to San Francisco and run all of International? And then she reached to me and said, hey, Nandu, you just sold your company. Why don't you join me as a director of Twitter in India? And it was funny because at the time, she really had to sell me on it. She really had to say, hey, this is a good role for you. And I was like, I don't know, I'm a founder. I build businesses. That's what I do. But I come to an important takeaway here. Takeaway number 2. Founders tend to recognize other founders. So again, we talk about a founder's journey to an exit. In this room, shoulder to shoulder with you right now, are other founders who are building a business. And you tend to see an eye for other people that are going through that same struggle with you. That struggle is both personal at times. You know the ups and downs. You know what it's like to work 100 hours a week, to not have enough time for your health, for your family at times, but then also the professional demands. The professional demands of having to meet expectations of boards, of your employees, of your suppliers, of your vendors. You know what it's like. Founders tend to recognize other founders. And so around you, you build a peer network. This, for me, I love it. You know, it was actually when I was thinking about this presentation, you know, every one of these photos were taken with founders at times of great uncertainty in their business. So that photo of Chad and Eleanor Lawrence before they sold Simply Safe for $1 billion, I saw them at a college reunion, and I remember Eleanor saying, she goes, well, I think I might have to go back into consulting because I need the healthcare insurance for our kids. And Chad was just exhausted. He was like, yeah, I'm working on a big distribution contract, and hopefully if we get it, it changes the direction of our business. It frankly could have gone either way. You know, when I see this photo of Amalik, who is the founder of Chai Point, when I talk about the struggles that I know that he's gone through, I remember him picking me up at the airport once in Bangalore, and his car was literally full of bags of chai. Literally, like, I got into his car, and I was like, this car stinks of tea, man. And he was just like, yeah, like one of our suppliers didn't show up, and I got to haul it from the distribution, and we were living through those struggles. And as I see these photos now of these people, most of them have done much better, and their companies have grown, and some of them have exited. Some of them didn't exit. It's fine. But I come to this important point that founders tend to recognize other founders, and that around you, you build that network. And that becomes important because it turns out that those skills of being a founder are directly relevant to scaling tech companies. In fact, they're directly relevant to a lot of companies even outside of tech. Like, what are those skills that you learn as a startup founder? Generally speaking, and I'll talk about CEOs here, but I think this holds true for anybody who's a founder of a business. There's 3 big goals that you always have as you run your business. Number 1, money. What is the money business, right? Cash flow. Do you have enough cash flow to meet the payroll? Do you have enough to meet your expenses? Venture, you know, sometimes that comes through venture funding. You might have to go out and raise capital. It might come from a bank. It might come from different alternative sources of capital on how you fund the business. Founders tend to have a very good understanding of a P&L of a business. What's your profit? What's your loss? What's your burn rate? I know a founder who's raised now over 300 million. You could wake him up at 2 a.m. in the morning and he knows exactly what he's burning, what is his runway, and how much further he has to go in terms of milestones before he raises the next round. And in order to hopefully meet the milestones of growing the valuation of his business. So founders and founder CEOs have a very, very good understanding of the money business. Number 2, founders tend to set a strategic vision for the business. Now that strategic vision at times is based on intuition, but often it also includes things like experience, data, knowledge, things that you source from conversations, things that you source from research. You start putting that all into the decision matrix and figuring out, okay, what should my company be doing? Now again, this becomes important because as you go from being a small and medium enterprise to a larger business, the crazy thing is you actually get more and more opportunities. As your business succeeds, you have more and more people calling you saying, hey, I'd like to work with you, or hey, we should do something together. And many of them are all very well-intentioned, and they mean, you know, they mean well, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for your business. So you need to be able to set the strategic vision of the business and find the thing that moves the needle radically for the business. Number 3, founders have a very important job of recruiting and motivating the absolute best talent that they can find and they can get a hold of. And a lot of times that is just like Valerie bringing me into into Twitter, which was convincing me to come join that business. She had to come convince me and tell me this is a great role for you. You have to be able to spot talent. You're looking for, I call it the diamond in the rough. It's always easy to say, hey, we hired a great person from Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, whatever. That's obvious, right? But oftentimes, if you're a founder and you're running a small business, you can't go meet those same expectations, and you've got to look for really good talent, nurture them, and bring them and put them in a position to succeed, to put them in a position so the business is going to do better. Well, it turns out that those skills are directly relevant to scaling tech businesses. And that's what brought me to Twitch. When I met Kev, and Kev said, hey, man, we got to really figure out Southeast Asia, APAC, and how to run a business in this market. We need an entrepreneur that's built a business That's what brought me here. And so I share that again because I want you to take heart that along the journey, no matter what happens with your current business, that the skills that you're building are directly relevant to other companies and will forever put you into a different category of professional. Now, but there might be a reasonable comment, which is some of you are saying, but wait a second, again, a founder's journey to an exit, Twitch has already exited, right? That's a common thing, like an exit, like you guys sold to Amazon, it's done, right? No, to me this is an important thing. An exit isn't the end. In the best companies, it's part of the journey. Now, I get it. If you're a venture capitalist, if you are an investor, you exit a company, you sell in the IPO, you get your distribution from maybe whoever bought your company, and you take your money and you go off into the next fund, right? VCs exit, right? But this isn't an audience of VCs. You guys are actually, frankly, doing the real work. I call it like venture capitalists sort of have an easy job, in my opinion. The tough part is building a company day in and day out and setting, again, that vision, recruiting people, making sure that you're managing your cash and hitting those goals. And to that end, an exit isn't just necessarily the sale of the company. So I love using this as an example. Like one of the best companies I think that's out there is Salesforce and their CEO, Mark Benioff, a remarkable leader. You know, I remember back when they IPO'd in '04, basically some people were thinking, hey, if I'm an investor, I've made a multiple on my early stage investment, I'm out of this business, whoa, that's an exit. If you exited back then, look at the ride you missed. Like, the company has only exploded, and guess what? Not only them. I mean, if you had decided to exit Amazon long ago, a decade ago, you missed arguably some of the most interesting parts of the story. So, as we think about this, and again, if you look at tech press, there tends to be a lot of focus put on, hey, is this company exiting? Exiting is sort of important to, like, again, investors, which is, an important part of the overall ecosystem. But for small and medium enterprises, we shouldn't hold that up as like the definition or criteria of success. It's just a part of the journey of what our company is going for. And again, it's very much, if you knew Kevin, he comes to work like it's day number one. He literally is still radically excited about where the business is going, and he's been doing it for almost 10 years. So let me try to recap a few key takeaways. I've covered a couple things here. Number one, be candid what raising capital means to you in the business. Do the math on the exit outcomes required. If you go out and raise $30, $40 million, you should have a clear expectation that your investors are probably hoping you sell for at least $100 million, right? Most investors like to make 3x on their money. So is your industry, is your business the type of business that has supported a lot of $100 million exits? Well, if not, then maybe raising venture capital isn't a good thing for you, which is, by the way, totally fine. I know entrepreneurs that have never raised a dollar or have only taken very traditional forms of finance and grow their businesses at 10, 15, 20% a year to now have businesses that they own 100% of. They are accountable to no other investor. They're accountable to their employees, their clients. But otherwise than that, they run their business the way they want. So if your business doesn't exit for a unicorn, that's fine. That's like not a big thing. That's like again, a venture capitalist problem. If you've built a solid, great, scalable business that's growing, then hallelujah, congratulations to you, because that's the type of business that I think is truly exciting. Number two, work and support other founders. They are a peer group unlike any other, and you'll find professional and personal support. My hope is that for you that are in the audience, that 10 years from now that you're on a stage showing pictures of founders going like, hey, do you remember when? Do you remember that time all those years ago that you were at that position? And wow, look how far we've come. You will find that other founders and other people that are building the businesses, other people that are on the startup journey, that they are tremendous support, again, in your both professional and personal career development. Number three, the skills you build as a founder are relevant to many companies. Take heart in this. Again, I come back to that moment when I wasn't sure what I was going to do next after I exited my business. I truly was a little lost. And ultimately, what I realized was as I got into larger companies, that my skills were directly relevant. So the things that you're doing right now as a small and a medium enterprise, as a founder of a business, will be directly relevant to other companies. And lastly, you know, an exit is not the end of the road. Again, the title of this was a founder's journey to an exit. Again, the exit isn't like a checkered flag that once you reached it, it's all done. The next chapters of a business can be far more interesting and far more lucrative. And so with that, I wish you all well on the journeys ahead and on the chapters ahead. And I'll turn it over to Cecilia for Q&A.
Thank you, Nandu, for the wonderful presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I found it very relatable and very helpful, as would many founders here. I wanted to understand, right? It's great that Twitch is here on the ground. I wanted to understand where Twitch is based in ASEAN, and how do we reach out to your team?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for your question. I will be based out of the Singapore office, and so where we're starting with Twitch. Twitch is actually very nascent in some sense in coming into international markets. We have basically built a platform in San Francisco and had been ingesting content kind of globally. So any of our efforts in Southeast Asia and APAC broadly have been really around working with content creators and getting their content onto the platform. That was really kind of one-dimensional. When I started talking to Kev, and it was really like, hey, we actually need to build a much more holistic business here. First, it kind of starts with thinking about like our go-to-market functions. So thinking about, hey, sales, business development, content, PR, comms, and getting that all on the same page. So that really will be kind of a big focus over the next year to 2 years. The tricky part is then how do we start thinking about product? Because in any tech company, scaling and building product tends to be very centralized. But I think one of the things that I have learned from being in kind of India and Southeast Asian markets for over a decade is you have to really think about customization of a product for these types of markets. So that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, we go fork the code and build a completely different application or different experience, but it starts to mean like, what are those things that we need to add to make our experience better for Twitch broadcasters and then Twitch viewers? So for example, improving the quality of latency, adding payment gateways, those are all kind of things that are coming up on the roadmap. On how to get in touch with me, I think my Twitter handle was up there, so that's one good way, LinkedIn, and also I'll be around the conference for a few more hours, and Bo, who's a member of my team, you can find us both, we'll be around here. Be happy to meet startups who think they have maybe an interesting solution that we should know about.
Hi Nandu, thanks for an inspiring story. I just want to understand, how do you feel your challenges exiting a well-established corporate job from US, going to India, start a startup, failure and move back to other countries? So how do you feel as a challenger this thing?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, when I left America and I moved to India, most people thought I was insane. Like most people in India were like, what? We're trying to move from India to America. Why would you want to leave India or America to come to India? I'll put it this way. I think I'm an entrepreneur, and I think I go where there's great opportunity. And when I looked at where India is, but not just India, it's also like Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, this is a great time to be an entrepreneur. It's just how like when Andrew started off, and he said, this is a good time to be an entrepreneur. I gotta tell you again, 10 years ago when I started my business, there was no WeWork. I was working in a basement. That was miserable. I remember I paid, I think it was $150 a month for a 1 MB line, like a copper line to my home. Like internet was so expensive. I mean, when I started my business, you actually couldn't put things up on the cloud. You actually had to go buy a physical server. and go do that, right? My God. So to me, and I want to answer your question, to me it was exciting when I came back to India because I think that where India is, but it's not just India, it's a lot of countries in this region. It's a wonderful time to be an entrepreneur. And to me, it's far more exciting working on big, challenging problems than taking the established corporate job. Trust me, my parents were like, they couldn't believe it. I have classic Asian parents. I don't have like wealthy US parents. Like, they couldn't believe that I would give up a job. Like, you could go back to Goldman Sachs. That's like every Indian parent's dream, right? But that just wasn't me. That's not what I wanted to do. And again, I share my story because I have a feeling that if you're working at a small and medium enterprise, or if you were a founder of that, you're probably like me. You're wired a little bit differently. Maybe you could always do those types of jobs, but that's just not us. And it'd be trying to fit like a square peg in a round hole.
Hey Nandu. Yeah, I'm Jaya. I just had really quickly, I think the most important takeaway for me here is that regardless of the exit and failure or success, I like how you touched upon the fact that you learn interesting skills that you don't learn in a typical job. So that's great. Most important takeaway. My question for you was, what do you think the relevance of formal education was for you? I'm talking about business school.
Yeah.
Right? Did that help you? What did you learn? What didn't you learn? As a founder, what should we know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a tricky question because I'll describe it like I felt it was beneficial for me. With that formal education, how do I put it? Like, for years, I did formal education in part because my parents kind of always said, hey, you should do that, right? Like, probably our society and a lot of elements of Indian culture and Asian culture, I think, are very common. It's a very high value ascribed to doing well in school. I guess I was fortunate. I was the kind that always did well in school, but I never really found a topic I loved. And I was good at math, so I got into finance. I was good at banking, and I learned numbers. But I was fortunate in the sense that there was a day at Harvard Business School with the entrepreneurial finance class. I thought, man, I'm just going to hear more professors talking about theoretical stuff. And my professor, a guy named Richard Hammermesh, who is now a venture capitalist, he'd built 3 companies. The first company exited for $8 million, second company exited for 40, the third exited for 200. And again, not to put disproportionate focus on an exit, but what struck me was, wow, this is a guy that builds businesses. And that was the first time I realized that that's the type of person that I want as a mentor, right? That's who I learned from. And the reality is as I've gone out and started building businesses and throughout my career, some of the best people I knew never had any education at all. They got very clear to the economics of the business. They were at all times aware. And so to me, I think it's great if you have it, but frankly, some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know never followed a conventional path. But they always had, I'll come back to that, those 3 things that I brought up. They at all times knew their money business. They would never get in the hole. They knew what a good deal was. They were incredibly good about setting the strategic vision about where their business should be going. And they were really good about motivating and selling people about why they should follow them. That answer it?
Thank you very much, Nandu. We have to close the Q&A now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.